Hey team, Grant Hagen here with DroneDeploy. Welcome back to Reality Capture Live, your bi-weekly dose of all things reality capture. We are super excited that you guys are here, joined it in with us. This is going to be another amazing conversation that we have slated in here today, and we appreciate you guys tuning in. This is really fun. We hope the last one that you guys saw a couple weeks back of just trends in reality capture was a really fun and encouraging conversation. We have more fun slated here for today. This is going to be a really great time. Thank you guys for tuning in. We're just going to dive right into it. So today's topic is all about accuracy. The best work hack I have found is to find people that are way smarter than you, bring them into a live stream, talk to them about some really fun questions and topics, and really just trying to simplify this idea of accuracy. This is probably one of the most brought up questions that we have. Some feedback that we got from last week, which to thank you for those of you who have emailed us and given us feedback from last week. It has been bring in more people, bring in some more folks into the conversations, which we have done this week. So we are really excited that you guys have joined in with us. If you are tuning in, tell us where you're tuning in from on the chat here in LinkedIn. I see a couple folks already popping in here down below. So really excited to have you guys in here. So this is going to be really fun. I got three friends here that are just experts in this topic and couldn't be more excited to put them in front of you guys to really talk all things accuracy. So just to remind you guys kind of how this works, what we've seen a lot of value and fun is join the conversation. We have some fun things along the way that we're going to be putting in front of you guys to help that become a thing. So one, tell us where you're tuning in from in the chat there in LinkedIn. We appreciate you guys joining in there. We're also going to have some fun polls in this conversation as well for you guys to tune into through menti.com if you want to queue up that web page that we're going to give you a code to join in the conversation. And then we have another fun idea here at the end, which is just a virtual way for you to submit a question if you guys have any on the future topic that we're going to talk about here in the coming weeks. So just real quick, before we dive in, why Reality Capture Live, what you can expect, how you can engage. We already talked about the last one there, but first, a big core value at DroneDeploy, one of our three, is to simplify. And so simplify. That is the whole heart behind Reality Capture Live, is to really simplify this idea of reality capture. We hope you guys find this helpful in your journey of simplifying this topic. We think that these are really important topics to talk about, but they can be really confusing and overwhelming to just dive into. So simplify, that's the heart around what we're doing here. And we hope that you guys walk away feeling a little bit more informed and that you would see, hey, let's bring some simplicity to these topics. And so what you can expect, last week you can see up there in the top left, Mr. Jono, he's joined in with us for trends in reality capture. And then this week we have a couple more friends, Adam there in that top middle, Austin and Hunter, who are going to join in with us here in a little bit, and some really fun things coming up in a couple weeks with a good friend of us over at Turner and Chris McKee, which we'll hit on at the end of this topic. But how can you engage with us? We already talked. Please put in some comments down there. It looks like I really appreciate you guys adding in. We got some folks from Colorado and Michigan and California. Thank you guys for tuning in with us as well to do that. And then we'll talk about a fun way to submit your questions to be a part of this, program, whatever we're calling this, to be included and have your questions answered on that too. So we want to dive right into this. This is going to be so fun. These three guys have just been an incredible resource towards this topic of accuracy. I couldn't be more excited to put them in front of you guys to really be a part of this topic. It was actually funny. This topic was really the reason why this was one of the first episodes we wanted to do for Reality Capture Live, was a brainstorm with Adam and I just talking about, man, how do we put this information in front of more people? I had sat in on a presentation with Adam and it was amazing. And I was like, dude, we have got to put you in front of more people. And so this is going to be a really good chance to do that. Hunter Cole there in the middle, another good friend here on the DroneDeploy team who is in our product team, who we're going to talk a little bit about in there too. And then someone from the industry. So Austin Lay over at Leighton Construction is going to join in with us here too to really dive into that conversation. So to briefly intro these guys before we dive in, Adam, if you haven't seen it, we've been posting it the last few weeks. He is the author of the Accuracy White Paper. If you haven't seen it, would highly encourage you to go check it out. It is an incredible resource to really dive into all things reality capture from the accuracy standpoint. So be sure to go check that out. Next, Hunter, again, came from the construction industry, a great guy who you're going to find a ton of info from about what we're doing on the DroneDeploy side on the product. And then lastly, we have Austin, who again is from Leighton Construction, who's reality capture manager. We were just talking about this morning about this topic, ironically, which was just funny to kind of say, hey, we're going to talk about this later today. So without further ado, I'm going to bring these guys in and we're going to have a really good time. Fellas, thank you for joining in. This is super exciting. Really appreciate you guys making the time in. Adam up there in the top right, Hunter bottom left, Austin there in that bottom right. Thank you guys for making the time in. Good to see you, fellas.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, this is great. Okay, I'm going to take our name tags off because we all know each other and we have just introed you guys into everyone. But guys, I'm really excited to jump into this. One, I think it's because it's one of the questions that we get asked the most is just accuracy in general. This is probably one of the most confusing and overwhelming topics in reality capture. And I should have prefaced this at the beginning. We are not going to dive into every single detail. If we did that, we would be on here for many, many hours. But we're going to kind of break this thing down with this idea of how do we define it? What are some kind of misconceptions about it? How do we kind of crawl, walk, and run in this idea? And then really just some fun hot takes at the end, which I'm really excited. I know, Austin, you got some fun ones that we're going to dive into. But this is going to be a good time. And I'm really, thank you guys for joining in and just appreciate you guys making the time. Cool. So Adam, I kind of want to key and really start you off on this topic here. And really that's the idea of what does accuracy mean? And again, like the first time I heard you talk about this, it was really cool because I was like, man, I never really understood it in that way. And I really just wanted to kind of kick things off to maybe you and saying, how do you explain this idea of accuracy to individuals when we start getting into how it relates to reality capture?
Yeah, I mean, it can be a rabbit hole, but at the same time, when we kind of think thoughtfully about how to break down the key differences and put things into buckets and just try to simplify from all the different perspectives that people might be looking at accuracy within, we can start to really give people some paths to walk down instead of it just kind of being this technical, difficult world. And largely accuracy, if you ask a civil engineer, he's going to be saying, well, how correct my topo is compared to where it should be in the world in XYZ position, that's accuracy. But then if you ask a solar roof installer, what does accuracy mean to you? Well, they're going to say, well, do you have the pitch of my roof correct? Do you have these square footage correct? And ultimately, those are two actually different kinds of accuracy. And it is those two main buckets that we try to portray to customers, prospects, the industry, to our partners, as we're educating folks about accuracy. So really where we start when we talk about accuracy is by breaking it down into really two main buckets. And the first would be relative accuracy, and the second would be absolute. So relative accuracy simply describes how accurate points within the map are to each other. So if we take that example of a roof, if I were to have perfect zero error measurements of the pitch, the slope, and the area of the roof, the dimensions, then I would have perfect relative accuracy. If I'm out there trying to check for the depth of a trench from top to bottom, that's relative accuracy. The slope of a road from one distance to another, that's relative accuracy. With relative, doesn't really matter where in the world your map is. It's just all about, do the shapes accurately represent what they should be in real life? Another way to maybe describe it a little bit more qualitatively is like, if you look at a 3D model and it looks picture perfect sharp, all your edges are clearly defined, you're probably at a place where you have good relative accuracy.
Yeah, totally. I think Austin, I kind of want to kick it to you a little bit too, because this is kind of folks' like intro into accuracy, right? When you kind of think about it, like you're probably not going out there doing ground control points, doing these like high, like super high accurate workflows. And I'm curious, like from your perspective, when you're fielding a lot of questions from folks like that are seeing these maps and seeing all the things that you're capturing, like what are some of the questions that you're getting as it relates to like relative accuracy type of applications?
Yeah, I mean, I would say for the most part, people just want to know a number, right? Like a project team calls me and says, hey, we have X amount of dirt we're moving per day. We just need to quantify that against what the subcontractor is telling us. Or, so a lot of times it's not even the back side of it, which was a lot of what Adam and I deal with, the ground control points, putting things in and things like that. They just want the actual data that comes out of it. And so I think part of it is knowing how much to explain to a project manager or superintendent versus overwhelming them, because when I first started learning about this from Adam, I was extremely overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that can be learned from it, and it's important things. But I think when you're starting out, uh, trying to understand accuracy, it's maybe trying to understand the simple parts of what you need to have answered first. Um, kind of like, I know we're going to talk about this later, but run or crawl, walk, run. It's like pick the small things at first that you need to know, and don't try to overwhelm yourself with like everything. So for us at Layton, it's like we pick and choose, how much information we're going to divulge, I guess, to our teams by to not overwhelm them. And so it's like, do we need to go into depth here about this? No, we're just going to keep this at a high level, or maybe there is a project manager or superintendent who really wants to get into the weeds.
Totally.
And sit down there and explain to him, all right, this is how it gets done. So.
And I'm curious too, because Hunter, from the product side of it, right? Like we obviously have a ton of different tools that help enable both relative and then what Adam's going to get into here with like absolute accuracies. But like, what are some of those tools that you see most heavily used when it comes to relative accuracy?
Yeah, totally. I think of like stockpile measurements as a great example, right? Like GCP's not required to get the volume really accurately of a stockpile, especially when you consider like the traditional means of how that stockpile would be measured, and keeping a rodman from having to traverse that large stockpile and maybe come away with 50, 100 points. Well, now we have thousands of points, 10,000s of points. And so we're really capturing the actual contours of that stockpile with much greater detail. And that measurement can be trusted even without doing an RTK or GCP flight.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, totally workflow dependent. I steal that quote from Adam all the time. I know he's going to get into it. And so yeah, it just comes down to what's the problem you're trying to solve or the question you're trying to answer.
I didn't prep it, but last time I almost had this little air horn for any acronym that was brought up that we don't have a definite. I don't have it on me. I don't know if I can even. Let's see here.
I love that.
Maybe here's my there it is. There's my air horn of an actual acronym. Anyway, we'll get to that later. That was a terrible part to try to infuse some humor into this. Adam, take it away here, buddy. Let's get into some examples. Yeah. What you talked about with what relative accuracy looks like. Guys, I'm totally distracted now. Keep going.
So I think what Hunter mentioned is a perfect example. When you just have a properly executed drone flight, some reasonable altitude, reasonable overlap of your subject, probably just going to fall into that style of flight plan by just using the default with DroneDeploy. And you're just trying to measure the volume of that stockpile as it sits that one particular date. We're not yet talking about changeover time, or we want to make sure the radius of that track is perfectly, let's say, circular, or the paint of that football field in that example, that our lines are exactly 10 meters apart or whatever it might be. Take that map, visualize it, whether it is actually in Texas where that job site should be, or thrown to Arkansas or thrown to Canada or anywhere else, as long as we're just taking that whole map as a group and shifting it anywhere, those measurements on the map, they're always going to stay exactly the same. So when we're talking about relative accuracy, the thought exercise that kind of will go through my mind is, would this measurement change if I took this whole map and I just threw it off somewhere else? And if the answer is no, all you care about for that use case in particular is relative accuracy. Kind of similar here with the PDF overlay. PDF overlays, when you bring them on for one map, you're aligning that overlay to the map. So however misplaced the map is, 3 feet to the left, 4 feet to the right, whatever it is, the PDF overlay is going to match that. And then a couple minutes ago, I was mentioning how if you look at a 3D model and it looks sharp, it looks accurate, our eyes are trained on detecting relative errors because we know that buildings outside don't look like melted ice cream. And that would be an example of relative error. And so when we're taking a look at wanting to use a 3D facade map for inspection, it's important that it look accurate so you can complete your inspection down to those fine details. And so when you're just trying to communicate, here's how something looks, and trace that back to your schedule or to a punch list, that's all in the world of relative accuracy. And there's a
Totally.
million others we could talk about too, but this
Yeah.
is only just giving you a few brainstormed ideas.
I think what you said that, and I've probably heard you say this multiple times, but it's like, hey, if you can measure that here versus Arkansas versus wherever, like that is a really good way to help understand relative accuracy. And it's just tricky because I think when folks really talk about this topic, that's usually the first question I've heard you ask is like, wait, are you concerned about relative accuracy or are you concerned about absolute accuracy? Which is what we really want to get into here in the second part. And we're kind of comparing and contrasting here. So, okay, relative accuracy, we've kind of checked the box and we'll have a little summary here in a second, but tell us absolute accuracy. What does this mean? Why is it important? How does it contrast with relative?
Yeah, so really anytime we are fulfilling some sort of survey or design like use case, oftentimes, or we want to compare data over time, we want to compare a design surface to a map. What is going to be important is that if the map is in Texas, that it be exactly where it should be in Texas and not in Arkansas. Because when we bring in a elevation grading surface, that when I bring in that geotiff file that says here's exactly where my earthworks should be by the time final grade has hit, I need to know if my map has reached those positions compared to my design plan. So in that world, in that context, we're caring about absolute accuracy, which is how correctly placed in the world is my map. You might also hear global accuracy used in replacement of absolute accuracy, kind of the same exact idea. You take a map that is relatively accurate, you add some, we won't abbreviate it, we'll say ground control points, we'll maybe get into some of those other fancy abbreviations later on, and you put it in the right spot in the world, and what that changes the game for how you can use that for comparative analysis.
Totally. And Hunter, I kind of want you to maybe walk us through here because this is really what's getting into a lot of the stuff that you see on a day-to-day basis in the product. And then Austin, I'll kick it over to you for just kind of where some of these things are happening on a job site. But kind of walk us through what absolute accuracy unlocks when that's something that you add to this reality capture data.
Yeah, definitely. So starting with the left here, what we're seeing in red and in blue is a cut fill heat map showing us where, compared to, let's say, the previous month's worth of progress, where areas have been cut in red and where things have been filled in blue. And it's important that these maps be placed exactly where they should be in the world, because if one map is incorrectly shifted a little bit left and a little bit down, that is going to be detected as cut or fill that didn't actually happen, but is really just maps that aren't lined up perfectly. So anytime we're talking about earthworks change over time, we are in an absolute accuracy world. But then even extending further than just earthworks, here I actually have two maps that are so precisely aligned that when you throw in a comparison slider there, it almost looks like one map. But even more than just maps too, you've got other design data that maybe you add at the beginning of the project that you want to line up to maps you make in 1 or 2 years. You want your walkthroughs and the BIM models that are aligned to those walkthroughs, since the walkthroughs themselves are aligned to the drone map, let's say. You want those to all align to your BIM model. You've got all of this collection of reality capture data that you don't want misalignment on over time, so that when you want to compare, when you want to know exactly like where are we going to have to core something, you're going to get it exactly correctly. So just having people stumble into a project and have everything just make sense, be on the same terms as each other, and not all of a sudden be kind of surprised by a jump map to map. If you just kind of want that experience, you do need good absolute accuracy. And then taking these first two use cases here, this is really focused on the analysis and the presentation of data in DroneDeploy. But a common set of use cases you're going to see is bringing data out of DroneDeploy for design. And certainly there are some design use cases that don't depend on absolute accuracy. We can go back to a solar installation. They just need a positionless model of the roof. But if we're talking about civil features, commercial construction, it really matters where that bridge is in connection to the roadway you're trying to connect it to. So anytime we're in that world of even approximating capital S survey or a more rigorous design process, we want those maps to be correctly placed in the world. So you bring them into Civil 3D, and it lines up with your existing topographic or civil data you're also bringing in from other places.
Totally. And Austin, I know this is near and dear and relevant to
Oh,
a
yeah.
lot of the things that you're working with right now. One of which is, where you and Adam are spending a lot of time, working together. Maybe we'll get to this in kind of the misconception side of it, but give me kind of a lay of the land of like how much absolute accuracy unlocks even more parts for your team to like get value out of what you're seeing within this reality capture data.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obviously huge, right? That's the driver of a schedule at times, right? And so if anyone in construction understands schedule, that's the most important part, is getting that schedule to jive with what it needs to be. And so when you leave things unchecked, like earthwork or different things like that, then you really have no way to say, hey, where are we at? Because the example that Adam uses that I love, right, when we talk about the size of some of these trucks that get full, right? And he talks about playing in a sandbox. And it's like, you fill up the back of one of those dump trucks and it says it holds 7 cubic yards, but, some people like to put a lot more on top. Some people like to leave it a little bit short. And so while that's traditionally probably the way that people tracked quantities of stuff, it's not accurate. You're just going based off of someone saying, oh yeah, this looks like it's a pretty full truck, or this looks like it's, over full. So just being able to, I think a lot of our project teams love the fact that they can drill down to that. And, we're seeing a lot of sub half-inch accuracy with GCPs and, RTK. And again, sorry for all the acronyms, but it's just,
That's all right.
It's
My
just
air
one of those
horn's not
things.
working.
I've got a follow-up for Austin, if you allow it. Oh, sorry, I didn't talk over you.
No, it's fine. Go.
No, I love that slide that Adam has about the absolute accuracy use cases. I think like when I was sitting in a similar chair to yours, like those almost became like trigger words when a project team would call me, right? Like, hey, we just got on this site. My grader says it's at X. I'm not so sure. Like, does a bell go off in your head that's like, okay, this is a project that absolute accuracy is going to be important, and I need to like treat it as such. And then the part B of it, like, have you seen teams like expand what they're looking to do with the data? What started of like solving a relative accuracy problem turned into an absolute accuracy problem, and how do you like to think about that when you're kicking off a project with a flight with a team?
Yeah, no, I 100% for the first part. I almost, it's funny because I've been doing it long enough now, but I still feel this like angst when we're going to do the first flight and like get ready to get that data back. Because even though I trust the software and I trust everything, you still just have this like little bit of like, all right, I've talked this up, I've shown this to be something on another project, but lo and behold, hopefully this doesn't, and it hasn't to this point, which is great. But I think, interestingly enough, one of the things that we've seen more is tracking like roof panels and different things like that go in. And so making sure those maps are aligned is super beneficial. And though our project teams will, use the annotation tool to annotate how much roof, metal roofing went in the one day. And then they can copy that annotation over. And so if the maps are misaligned, all of a sudden their square footage is thrown off. And so that's a spot that I really never thought of. I thought roofing's probably pretty simple. You can look up there, you can see what's there. It's not as, but really they're really loving that. They like that, to be able to measure the square footage of the roof and say, all right, this is how much was done today. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes I'll see another square in red that shows what the schedule is supposed to have done in that time. And so it's a tough pill, I think, for a subcontractor to swallow when you're like, hey, here's the data. Like, I don't know that they're using it that way, but I think it's a way to like self-check everybody and say, look, this isn't just us coming to you as the general saying, we want this done faster. This is where it sits in space in real time. And I think when you can start to prove that out accurately, it just holds a lot of value to the people that you're sharing that with.
Totally. I think what I think hopefully the summary here, and I'll bring up a slide that hopefully can help narrate this a little bit, is absolute accuracy unlocks a ton of things. I think that's really the main driver of really why we wanted to kind of differentiate these. Like relative accuracy, incredibly impactful. You can do amazing things with it. And we see a lot of people do amazing things with it, but absolute accuracy really starts to unlock these other workflows, like what you had mentioned, Hunter, and like what you had said, Austin. And just to kind of, if you've been snoozing on us, here's a quick little summary slide to really give you kind of, again, this like comparison and contrast of like what it is, what its use cases are, how to quantify, and really the required inputs for this. And this is kind of a tee up into maybe the next section here of really this definition portion is really this difference between what is a GCP and what is a checkpoint. Because this, again, is something that also, and I see Austin laughing over there, because this too is something that often can get really overwhelming. And I think it's important to note here, like the folks that are using some of these platforms or really some of these reality capture tools probably don't have a extensive GIS background, and like they're contractors, they're designers, they're engineers, they're folks that are just wanting to get the job done. And some of these tools can, in terms, can just seem really overwhelming. And so, Adam, I'm going to kind of kick this one to you because this, similar to the relative versus accuracy, I really want us to camp a little bit here of this difference between a GCP and a checkpoint, why they're both very important, and really what the difference is in between. I have a graphic that we can float here too to kind of give some of that. But walk us through what this means here, because this isn't a whole session on what the difference is and how they process, but I want to kind of round table this a little bit too, because you get into this world and you find out this definition is even something that you kind of have a baseline understanding of. And yeah, Adam, I'll just kind of kick it to you to start this one.
Sounds good. So we've been talking about absolute accuracy, and we're saying it's really important that these maps be correctly placed in the world. And if you just go out and you fly a regular drone, whether it's RTK or a standard, and there's another abbreviation, whether it's a high accuracy focused drone or whether it's more of a standard drone, the assumption we can generally make is that you are not going to get inch accurate positions out of just a drone flight by itself. Sometimes that could be, you could get that, but you want to assume that you won't. And so the problem statement is we need our maps to have good positional accuracy, but generally speaking, the drones themselves are not going to give you inch accuracy alone. And so that's what a GCP or a ground control point solves for. So a ground control point is a surveyed point on the ground of your job site. And typically you're going to have at least, let's say, 4 or 5 of those dotted around your job site. The more the merrier, generally speaking. It could be a checkerboard marker like you see right on this graphic. It could be some spray paint. It could be some really clean road paint that recently went down like an arrow. But the important thing is that someone with survey grade gear goes down to that point and measures it, typically with much better than inch level accuracy. So we basically get these points that say, I am exactly here and I know it. And so when you add those in with your drone images, we are going to force the map to align to the position of that ground control point. Another way I kind of think about it is ground control points are kind of like the push pins that hold the poster of your map together, where you know exactly where you should be, where those push pins should be on the wall. Before getting into checkpoints, anything you guys want to kind of add or clarify on ground control points? Because that's obviously a big topic we hear about a lot.
I think the one thing, and I'll kick it to you maybe next, Austin, is like, I'm glad you used that analogy, because that was when it kind of clicked for me, was those kind of pins, right? Like you think of a map and it's really a cloth, right? Like you can stretch it, you can pull it, but you need anchor points to really help say, hey, this is a known and fixed point. I guess, Austin, I'm maybe curious from your perspective of working with field teams, like what's the questions you hear the most when you say, hey, we need to increase our absolute accuracy, or we're going to add absolute accuracy to this with ground control points? Like, what's some of the questions that you hear most often kind of around that workflow?
I mean, I think the biggest question is like, how do I get the most accurate map or most accurate data? And so then it's like, okay, well, we need to have ground control points to measure it. And it's interesting because it's not a huge undertaking to get that done. And I think a lot of people think it is, and then they hear the kind of the workflow and they're like, oh, this is way more work than I want to be putting in right now. And so, but then they'll say things like, once they see the workflow, then it's like, all right, this was definitely worth our time and effort to get that in. So I think for me, when we talk about ground control points, and this is a kind of, I guess, not a pain point that Adam drives home, but it's like you want to try to have 1 or 2 in the middle of the job site, right? Which Hunter, Grant, you guys know, coming from the construction side, it's pretty much impossible at times to put something in the middle of a construction site. So we try to tell teams, like, we need to be out there first thing early on so we can get 1 in the middle of the job site or 2 in the middle. That way we can have something to reference back to and things like that. And so I think really for me, when we talk to the project teams, it's showing them data from a previous project of why this is important. And then of course, what that use case is of, hey, this is what this project saw, this is what you can see. And then I think a lot of times organically it just grows. That project manager will then move on to a different project and he'll say, hey, this really worked well on this project. And I mean, that can be said for our entire drone program. But I think at the end of the day, it's giving them some examples of why this works well and how it can benefit them as they go forward. So.
Yeah, well said. And Hunter, for those that haven't processed GCPs and ground control points within DroneDeploy, I'm giving you a softball here, friend. Like, clearly we do that. Clearly that's something that we've excelled in pretty well. Like, give us a little way of like what that looks like from our side of it, of really just bringing the simplicity into that workflow too, because it is an extra step. Like, to get really accurate, maps, it does require a little bit more, but clearly the simplicity sense. Give us like a little lay of the land on the product side.
Yeah, 100%. So we try to make it as easy as possible on the user. So like Austin and then like my background in the field, typically I was working with a surveyor that wasn't me. And so I would have to work with he or she to export a CSV or a text file from their data collector. So we've set these GCPs, we've gone around and collected them. We now have like this list of points, X, Y's, and Z's in a certain coordinate system. DroneDeploy provides some templates to make that really easy to get the formatting right. And then when you're uploading your images in the smart uploader, you just check that you have GCPs, you add that CSV, you hit upload. A few minutes later, you'll get an email from us saying like, hey, guess what? We saw some GCPs in your map, confirm that we've tagged them automatically accurately. So you can go in and scrub those images and see how good of a job we did at identifying the center of those X's or those even bucket lids I see sometimes. And so from there, your map's like off to the races like any other DroneDeploy map. And then if you do need to see like after the fact that we place them in the right spot, or you want to track one down, somebody like called, hey, an excavator ran one over, I need to replace it. Oh, which one was that? We do have a tool in the product now to see your GCPs on your map as well and see the coordinates of those GCPs if you need to back into them. So cool. Yeah, that's how it works in the product.
Yeah, that's great. Perfect segue here, and I'm actually seeing some really good questions on the chat here that I'm actually going to kind of cue to you guys here a little bit. This is kind of our first poll, and this was really a question. I was trying to think like, man, what's the best question to really ask around accuracy? And the one that came to mind was just, what are the biggest challenges when it comes to accuracy within and reality capture data in itself? So if you haven't, if this is your first time kind of in with us and using this tool, go to menti.com. I think the code up there is 4415-3146. This is really just a chance for you guys to engage in and kind of add some notes and thoughts to the conversation. And your responses come in live. So as you do that, open up another tab, click on the code there up at the top. But this is actually a good question while we see some kind of responses coming through from Andrew. So thanks for including this in on the chat down there. But he said, hey, roughly what percentage of construction jobs and drone captures are flown today that use GCPs? And Adam, that's maybe a good question from you that you kind of see on the solution side, and Hunter, and really I'd be curious to hear that from you too, Austin, of what percentage of jobs do you guys kind of see using GCPs? And again, for the audience out there, please submit your responses here for just like your biggest challenges, because this is going to kind of cue us up to some misconceptions that we're going to transition into next.
I wonder if we do have any of the like overarching DroneDeploy data we could pull on that, because we could probably actually find what the number is. I would personally just kind of have to go off my anecdotal experience. I would throw out a number of like somewhere between like 40 and 50% of projects and maps on commercial construction sites are using GCPs, and we're seeing that grow every single year. I think kind of as Austin was saying, once teams get that flavor of value from ground control points, that's when it starts to grow. But then still, at the same time, we've talked about these absolute benefits, these benefits of absolute accuracy, but there's still a huge amount of value to be had with just making relative accurate maps and then doing what you can within each map. And if that's where you are in your program of evolution, you could still do very precise QA QC against a PDF overlay to check that everything's installed correctly. So I would venture to guess around half.
Hunter, what would you say to that?
Yeah, that feels right to me, Adam, based on all the metrics I've seen. I think your point about like once an organization sees the benefit of doing all their captures with a high degree of absolute accuracy, then that organization is likely going to do it across all their job sites. And so I think it just depends on where that company is on their journey. And once they've kind of seen the light and seen the fruit of being able to do these advanced workflows, then they're going to do it kind of from that point forward is what we typically see.
Totally. Austin, round us out here. I mean, what do you typically see? I mean, I know you're getting more and more, but
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Here's the thing. So last year we were at 0% midway through the year, right? And then we started some of the projects at the end of the year. I'd say 25 to 30% right now, and that's really just grown over the past 8 months from 0% to this, and that's just, as I said, it's these projects are wrapping up that started with it. And I'll just add this little caveat: like there was definitely some pain points. Adam knows that, and so we had to work through a few of those things. And so I think at the end of the day, it's if you're ready to take this on, you got to understand like there is going to be a bit of a bump in the road and a little bit of a learning curve, but um, it all worked out in the end, and it was all worth it. And so it's unfortunately I've talked with Adam for hours and hours about this, and it's like there's just not that like one simple like click this button, push this button, and then you're good to go. There's a lot of that goes into where you put your GCPs, where you set these different things, which ones you check as checkpoints, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, but there's what drone you use even, and so there's a lot of different caveats that go into it. And so I would just encourage anyone who's listening, don't feel overwhelmed, because it is overwhelming, but don't allow yourself to get to that point.
yeah. It's almost if you put this answer in here to the question here, because I agree with this for whoever submitted this, that this is a big challenge. Hunter talked a little bit about getting files from a surveyor and really getting those numb points. That is tricky. And I think maybe a common theme that I'm kind of hearing from really all of you guys is just, hey, it's not ideal to unlock all those things that absolute accuracy give you, but it is trending to be easier. I mean, that is definitely the case in which we're seeing with both hardware and workflow on the software side, which we'll get into a little bit kind of into the misconceptions here as well. But thanks for submitting that in there as just kind of you guys engaging in here. Let me pull this back up here just to keep us moving along. Because this is really the question where I want to camp a little bit more, is that, like, what are some of the misconceptions around accuracy? And I think the ones that we hear the most in this kind of theme and topic is really what I kind of want to tee up here. And maybe I'll kind of toss it around the table here a little bit, but these are really the three misconceptions that I hear the most, and really the reason why I want to bring these guys on is you need a really expensive drone to get really high accuracy. You need ground control points all the time and everywhere to get really high accuracy. And then RTK, what is that, and how does that kind of play into it? And maybe Adam, I'll kick it to you first with this misconception of you need a really expensive drone. That was actually one of the questions that came up here in the chat to get really high accuracy maps. And so I want to kind of maybe start with that, because that's also a big challenge, is like, hey, what drone do you use? And kind of cue your white paper that you put together. If you are curious, again, we have plenty of resources that kind of help dive into these topics in more detail. But Adam, I'll kick it to you. Misconception: super expensive drone, really high accuracy. Is that a truth, or is that more of a not necessarily true?
Not necessary. It'll make your life easier, sure, to have a nicer drone. But at the end of the day, like if you're looking at a limited hardware budget and you do want to be making some accurate maps, both relatively and absolutely, a DJI Air 2S, which fully kitted out is going to cost you $1,400. I found in my white paper I was able to get consistently 2-inch accurate topos out of that drone, which is basically like Costco priced. So you get that thing in the palm of your pocket. It's easy to use. It's excellent. So where does the more expensive hardware come into play? I mean, sure, if you get a Mavic 3, if you get a M300 with a P1, you're going to cover more ground more quickly. You're going to get a little bit more accuracy out of it. Sure, you might get down from 2 inches to 1 inch. There's going to be some time savings. There's going to be some more accuracy to be had, but do you need a $5,000, $10,000, $20,000 drone to make high accuracy data? No.
Yeah, good point. I see some other chatter here in the chat as well. This is great questions that are coming up in here too. I kind of want to transition to the second one here as well about just, hey, do you need GCPs to get really quality analysis? And Hunter, I'm going to give you the tough one here. This one's a little bit tricky of a one to answer, but how would you answer that? Like, again, we talked about the difference between relative and absolute, but hey, misconception: do you need GCPs to get really accurate results?
Yeah, I'm gonna dodge your question a little bit and say there's no downside to adding GCPs. Like we would always recommend having a couple GCPs. If you've got an M3E, you're flying with DroneDeploy Instant RTK, you're in an awesome coverage area. It still helps to add a couple GCPs. It is like a little bit of a last 20% type effect. Like, and you can reference Adam's white paper and the things he found that like it will improve the accuracy, but you can also still get really great results. We'll get into the crawl, walk, run metaphor, spoiler alert, but like flying an RTK drone is almost always going to be better than flying an Air 2S with no GCPs. And then adding GCPs to an RTK drone or an RTK flight is always going to be better than just doing RTK. And so like there's no downside to adding it. The good news is like with the modern RTK drones that are out there, you have to do a whole lot less of them. So that's asking for a lot less of that surveyor's time, spending less time like processing those GCPs. And then just my obligatory nod is you really don't know what you have until you have a checkpoint or two in there as well. And so definitely have some checkpoints to check that RTK data as well. Yeah. So then you have some ground truth.
Well said.
Yeah, and I'd imagine, Grant, we're probably going to have a section where we talk about checkpoints, but I just want to double down on that as well and make sure we do save time to talk about that.
Yeah, for sure. And Austin, I maybe gave you the hardest question of the three. Is that sorry, buddy, but I mean, you've been really getting into this world of what RTK is, and I don't know how we've gone 20, 30 minutes in here without what is RTK, what's its definition. I probably should have included it in kind of the definitions page too, but tell us a little bit of your experience using the RTK with the Mavic 3 Enterprise, and is the misconception that you need that to get really high accurate results? And I think you kind of know I think we kind of know what the answer is to it, but yeah, curious to hear kind of your field use thoughts to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll let Adam explain exactly what RTK is. He's better than I am. But no, I mean, look, yeah, you can get accuracy, as Adam said, to 2 inches. But honestly, we've just made the decision that we're going to stick with the Mavic 3 with RTK. It just, as Adam alluded to just moments ago, you don't need it, but it makes life easier. And I don't know, I was just texting him the other day, telling him I flew this project that was up in, I'm based here in Salt Lake City, Utah. So we were up in the mountains and flew this project RTK, no ground control points, and some of the accuracy I saw through that, based even comparing it to the surveyor, was really eye opening and beneficial to where I felt confident enough to just say, hey, here's what we got with the drone, here's what you guys have, let's just do a compare and contrast real quick. And so I'm all about trying to make the life of whoever's flying a drone on a project easier. And while the fully fitted out M3E, will run you somewhere between 5 and 6K. On some of these projects that are really big, it's a minimal cost to them, and so it's a great drone to have. And I realize that not everyone has that luxury at times, and so going off of Adam's white paper, yeah, the Air 2S is still a great drone, but we just want to be as accurate as we can. We're not flying M300s or anything like that. Those drones are very expensive, and honestly, I'm sure you can get as much accuracy, but I've tested the M300 versus the M3E, and I mean, I didn't see a massive difference between the two, and the cost is, I don't know what M300 costs, but I know the price difference is pretty large. And so, we've just made the commitment that if we're flying projects that require, earthwork or different things like that, like we're just using the M3E. We look at it as 2 buckets. We say, is your project just kind of the bread and butter of what DroneDeploy is? Is it the photos, the pictures, the video, the pano? And Air 2S is the perfect drone to use for that situation. Are you going to want to quantify, track a lot of different things? Then you're going to want to use the Mavic M3E, because it's just going to give you that much better data set to feel that much more confident when you go to speak to people about it. So
yeah, totally. And I guess It feels weird, but Adam, give us a little bit of rundown of RTK. Now, we don't need this to be a master class here, but like, what is it? Why has it been really helpful? What's kind of the definition, the acronym, kind of before we transition into it, kind of some of the hot takes and crawl, walking, and running?
Yeah, definitely. So when we're talking about absolute accuracy, we kind of previously set the stage with that problem statement of, let's assume drones alone aren't going to put the map exactly where they need to be. And so you use a ground control point to lock down the map and position. Well, you could also kind of infer, well, what if the drone effectively is a ground control point or has the same accuracy or similar accuracy as a ground control point? And so RTK, which stands for real time kinematic, is basically a workflow where that drone, when it's out there flying, it is getting positional corrections in real time, hence RTK, so that when it takes a photo, it should know and accurately report where that photo was taken, typically within an inch or so, as long as it's within a good network coverage area. So when you're flying an Air 2S that doesn't have RTK and it's not as fancy of a drone, as Austin was talking about, it becomes more and more important to put down GCPs in the middle of your map and more of them. But when you use an RTK drone in the effort of high absolute accuracy, what that buys you is, in the very best case, sometimes you don't even need GCPs. If you're in an area of good network coverage, you do need to make sure you're validating that to prove it. Assume no accuracy until it's proven. But then in practice, what is going to be my standard recommendation with RTK drones is it means you can be a lot more lightweight with your GCPs. You can really generally focus in on GCPs in the perimeter, find those points near the access roads that you're going to actually be able to keep a point for the next year. So what it really means in short is that out of the drone flight alone, the positional accuracy will be so much better than a standard drone. And when you do use ground control points, you can be a lot more sparing and use less field time to capture them. So ultimately, it's just more accuracy with less time, and we make that as easy as possible with our in-flight RTK workflow, where you just fire up the controller and it'll connect to the network.
Love it. We may do another one of these just around that. There's a lot there, but really kind of a theme that we talked about earlier was just like, hey, hardware is really helping simplify a lot of these high accuracy workflows, RTK being one of them, which again, we can dive into here a little bit kind of in the Q&A once we get there. But I want to get to this part because this is really important for a lot of folks that are on here with different backgrounds, different kind of stages of where they're at in this process, in kind of crawling and walking and running. This is a term that's probably overused too much, but I like it because it helps kind of really elevate no matter where you're at, just helping you kind of take the next step. That's kind of the idea here. And I want to camp here, and I'll maybe take this one and then kind of kick it over to you guys here in a second. If this is your first experience into accuracy from aerial capture, even ground capture, this is a really important thing as well. The crawl here is to simply start simply. Like there isn't really anything in here that you can benefit more from other than just listening, educating yourself. There are tools and resources abound in this topic, one of which we've hit on a couple times with Adam's accuracy white paper. If you're on that full on, like, hey, I love to, dive into the numbers and the details, would highly encourage you to go check that out. DroneDeploy accuracy white paper, Google it and you'll find it there and on our website too. But the one I wanted to kind of point to is Adam pretty much put on this masterclass. Actually, I think this was by Brooks here on our team around accuracy. And again, this is in the DroneDeploy Academy. Would highly encourage you. Very video focused, a lot of great resources in there. But start simply start. Like that is the best crawl thing that I would encourage our users to do is really continue to educate yourself around this. Austin and I were truly just on the phone this morning, and we were walking through kind of an idea around this too. And it's one thing we were talking about is just, hey, there are no failures in this. There are only lessons learned. And I think that is like something we don't really talk about enough is, hey, you're continually learning and, anchor yourself with people and resources that help you in that process. But I just wanted to highlight that here. DroneDeploy Academy, some great resources, Adam's white paper. Adam, it looks like you got something you wanted to add in there.
Yeah, and it has to do with the bottom right screenshot you pulled up right there. And I'm really glad you did because I think it fits really, really well with crawl. when we're talking about like you're just starting to make maps of some level of known accuracy, let's forget GCPs, RTK, and whatever other fancy abbreviation is out there. And we're just flying for relative accuracy. I encourage everyone on this call who hasn't been doing it yet, do a basic drone flight outside your house, outside your office, wherever. Take a tape measure, go on the ground, measure some road paint, measure the cracks between sidewalk, measure anything. This doesn't need to be like a really too technical of a use case. Just go out there with measuring tools you know how to use, process a map in DroneDeploy, and see what the difference is. And just like Grant said, if you see big errors and big differences, there's no shame in that. That just means, hey, let's go back to the drawing board on, is there a flight plan adjustment we need to make, or is something up with my drone's camera? Just exposing that information, whether good or bad, is going to give you that next step. And more than likely, you're probably going to find that with that road paint measurement, it'll probably be within an inch or two. And that'll probably start to give you some light bulb ideas of, okay, well, how can I use this for my actual job site?
Totally. And Austin, I kind of want to kick it to you because you are walking, my friend, right? Like this is stuff that you're currently using and getting more involved with. And it's great. Like I would say you're maybe running and helping others kind of walk alongside of you. But yeah, just from a, like, I think the idea and takeaway here was like, hey, find new value opportunities, right? I think that's something you mentioned earlier was just continuing to listen to your project teams of saying, hey, what other questions do you have with this? Like, what are other things that we can help kind of answer in that? So what kind of encouragement would you give for folks to kind of continue to walk?
I mean, my biggest encouragement is don't get discouraged, right? Because there's definitely a lot of that can happen. But I'd also say be optimistic as well. Look for opportunities to use the data for different things. And DroneDeploy's done a good job of coming out with a lot of different tools. I know that what we're seeing here on the screen right here, for example, on the right, this is a stockpile analysis, I think, and it's showing that's the 3D view, and you get just the simplicity of like looking at what that looks like or different things like that. And so, but I would say for us as a company and for me personally, like the biggest thing is just arming yourself with the understanding of it, because there's nothing more frustrating than trying to answer a question to something you might not fully understand. And so it's been a huge learning curve, but at the same time it's been super beneficial, right? And it's just like the phone call you and I were having this morning, right? We were talking about something a little different, but we're still talking about accuracy, and it's a sense of like it's okay to fail, I think, a little bit, and then to get back up and figure it out. Like, trust me, there were some times when I would call Adam, completely disheveled, trying to figure something out, and he was just so like, hey, no, this is what you got to do here, this is what you got to do there. And I get that Adam can't be in 1,000 places at one time, which is why he should get his white paper.
We've tried.
Yeah. But I think overall, it's like, you never, until you start using the tool fully, like you don't understand the different opportunities that are there. And I think for our project teams, it's like, it started out in the basic form of, we just need to understand the earthwork and how much earth is being moved. And then it turned into, hey, we can track this, or hey, we can do this. And I think that just is a nod to one, the great people that we have on site who are running the stuff and understanding those things. But it's also just, hey, we need, a question gets asked, we need to track trenching. All right. Well, if the map's not accurate, then the trenching is going to be difficult to track. And so it's just, when you're looking for new opportunities, I think, and new values, it's even having those conversations with your field team. What are the things that you guys are looking for? How do you want to track that? Those are questions I ask when I go on site, because a lot of times I want to go out there and I want to share the world with them. And really it's like, well, we really just need to know 2 or 3 things. And so then it's like, okay, now I can focus my time and energy on those 2 or 3 things and not everything.
Totally. No, that's great. And then Hunter, I'm going to kind of kick it to you and kind of pull up another tab here of really for the folks that are running and they want to run faster. Like, what would you suggest to them around this idea of accuracy? Like, how do you fine tune your process to, bring more people into the fold? And what are you seeing of what you're kind of developing on the product side of it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And we're seeing our customers do such amazing workflows in the product right now that, frankly, are a little bit surprising day to day. I mean, like, we just launched 3D DXFs, and so another acronym, so shame on me, but basically the ability to bring a CAD file into the 3D environment in DroneDeploy and see whether you have as-built information or design information or civil information, to see that contrasted against your site in real time. And it's super powerful. You can click on these lines and see that it's a road center line, or if you had buried utilities, you could see high voltage electrical. And so bringing that information together, design and reality, is kind of what it's all about. And high accuracy maps are kind of the baseline to be able to do this really well. And so from a product perspective, we've been investing heavily around high accuracy, things like custom coordinate systems, things like improvements to our GCP tool. We've got new and improved digital terrain models that better filter out man-made elements, so you're just quantifying dirt. And so it's really amazing just to see kind of like our customers push the limits and like taking those DXFs of utilities and making it a virtual dig board, for example, and comparing like what they've built to what the coordinated model showed. And so yeah, if you're running, like continue to run, be close to your surveyors, be close to your project teams, ask them about the questions they're trying to come up with answers to, and see if that's something our tool is a good fit for. So, you know, monitoring earthworks progress over time and answering the question of like, how much work have I done since the last time we flew, or since the last time we had a pay period, versus like, how far do I have to go to the finish line? Like, how far away am I from final grade? Like, these are questions that like light bulbs should be going off for like absolute accuracy and making sure I've got you know, a quality map in front of me. And I think if you have the ability to be close to a surveyor at your organization or a field engineer, or you have documentation that show existing monuments around your site, you can check your map, like kind of like fudging a checkpoint a little bit. That's a good like gut check to like understand that the map you've got can be trusted, is suitable for these advanced workflows. And then you're kind of off to the races, kind of the sky's the limit. So yeah, it's super exciting right now. It's gotten a lot easier.
Yeah, I think the only thing you may have missed in there is step alongside with us. You know, I think a lot of the things that you're, you know, building in the product is really direct feedback from guys like Austin, right? And then upflowing that through guys like Adam and the tons of people on our team that are, you know, saying, yeah, let's continue to simplify this. Like the first kind of ever instant RTK that doesn't require some of the kind of, you know, troublesome pain points to connect to networks. And like, you guys are building some really great things that help people run faster. And so if that's where you're at in this process, again, like continue to give us your feedback, like all the things that we're doing and that your team is hard at work on, Hunter, is really a direct correlation from the feedback that we're getting. So, okay, we're getting really close to time, and I want to get to some questions that we do have here on the comment thread, and then really just any hot takes. One question that I really like from Job in here is it relatively easy to get GCPs yourself if you have the equipment, or is it better to lean on a survey? This is a really good question, and I guess, Adam, I'll have you take this one. Like, this was a question that I had a ton, was how hard is it to just do this yourself rather than to bring in a surveyor? Obviously, there's pros and cons to each of those, but maybe kind of answer that one a little bit of just like with what kind of some of that equipment is as Austin hops off here. But yeah, walk us through that a little bit of kind of the equipment side of it.
Yeah. So I'm going to separate this into two quick sections. The first would be if you haven't processed a bunch of GCP maps and validated how accurate they are with checkpoints, first work with a surveyor where you know you're just going to get very accurate points, and you're going to process the maps, and you're going to learn more about the map processing, validation, and analysis, knowing that the raw points you got are correct. But when you do feel like it's time to bring that in-house, it's not that hard. I would say a starting point would be I would take a look at products by MLID. In particular, the RS2 Plus is a fantastic entry point. I've got one myself. And then you'll want to look for a corrections service, an N-trip corrections service, something like a Hexagon SmartNet or a TopCon TopNet. If you're in an area that's covered by that network and you got cell service, it's a pretty easy workflow. If you're in a rugged environment, offline, no network coverage, still not really hard, but definitely harder than if you're in an area where you can get corrections.
Totally. That's great. I know that we are getting close to time here, which guys, this has been a super fun conversation. One, I just appreciate your guys' time and coming through here. And one, for the folks that are tuning in and adding some notes to the chat section here too. Thank you guys for doing that. It's fun just to hear your guys' comments. It makes these way more engaging and fun to be a part of. And I just want to kind of lead to some kind of call to actions for some folks of next steps and what that kind of looks like. And one of which is really just a great opportunity to meet the three of you, including myself, at our user conference. So this is coming up this year here in the mid part of October out in Denver, Colorado, and would really just encourage you guys, if this is something that you're really interested in wanting to check out, the four of us will be there. Would love to meet you in person and would love to have an opportunity to go over these topics in more detail. There is a whole breakout section around accuracy and how you can unlock it and what are some really just continuing these conversations too. And in that, we have a special discount code. This is only good until Sunday night. So it is Thursday about 2 o'clock Central Time here. This will be good till Sunday night. If you do DDC-RCL, if you want a discounted ticket, would encourage you to check that out. Let's keep the conversation going. Hopefully this is something that you guys are encouraged by and are just finding a ton of value in tuning into as well. And so one, thank you guys for tuning in. This has been super fun. We really do appreciate you guys on the chat. And Adam, Hunter, Austin, thank you guys. Honestly, this is too fun to be able to just do this for an hour long and just ask you guys some really good questions. But really appreciate your guys' time. Any kind of final thoughts, Adam, Hunter, or Austin?
Yeah, just encourage you guys to stay conversational with us. Shoot us a message on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to kind of whiteboard over any of the other questions you have. I think Grant alluded to it, but we do a lot more than just make the software. If we need to figure out where your GCPs are going to go, help communicate to the surveyor, like get everything across the line. That's what we're here for too. And that's what makes me happy. So yeah, definitely don't hesitate. Don't be shy.
Yeah. Hunter, anything you'd add?
No, just thanks for having us. And if you have feedback on the product itself and the tools in the platform, things that are working well, and maybe more importantly, things that you think could be better, feel free to reach out. We've all been tagged in one of the LinkedIn posts, and that's how we make the tool better, is by hearing feedback from customers like Austin. And so just keep the feedback coming.
Cool. Austin, you get the final words, my friend.
No, I just appreciate it, guys. I love being a part of this. It's, I will say, just as a final thought, like, DroneDeploy does a great job of listening to their customers from the product side, and then on top of that, like as Adam said, getting us across the finish line. He personally was key in that, and so I mean I thank him all the time, so I'll publicly thank him again. But it's just one of those things where it's good to work with people that really say these things and they follow through with it. So yeah, I'll just end it at that.
Love it.
Appreciate it, and likewise, you're driving it over there at Layton.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for the time. It is great to be able to connect with you guys. Thank you for tuning in. Really some exciting things just to kind of format here too for the next topic that we're going to have. This is going to be super fun. We have a friend from Turner and Chris McKee. This topic I think is going to be really exciting. We've kind of dubbed it as the reality of robotics. And you can imagine all the things that you see out there around robotics, what's going on, what's actually happening. That just seemed to be the topic that we wanted to kind of cover here, was what is the reality of what's going on here. And so that'll be in 2 weeks. We hope you guys have a chance to tune into that. We'll send out some more info around that as well. But until next time, thank you guys for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Thanks.